Here is one of the top 5 most attended presentations in 2020 at Horizon, a user conference dedicated to IBM Planning Analytics and TM1, a step-by-step demonstration on implementing business requirements using advanced rules techniques. Presented by Rashed Rafiq.
Okay, welcome back to the conference. We're getting to the end of the stuff that we're doing for the English stream out of Sydney. And what would a TM1 user conference be without something about advanced rule calculations? So to take us into that part of the conference, I would like to introduce again Rashed Rafiq.
Thank you very much, Ben. Hello, everyone. I'm Rashed Rafiq from the Sydney CubeWise office, and I'm going to talk about some of the techniques that we can use in rules calculations that will be helpful in tackling some of the problems that we may face on a daily basis. So let me share my screen with you all, and we should get started. Cool. So look, what I did is I came up with like 4 scenarios that I would say, like, you might experience on your day-to-day basis, and some of them I've definitely seen in coming quite frequently in customer cases. So what I'll do, I'll take you through each one of these, and I guess for a TM1 developer who is a beginner or maybe at a mid-level, still some of them, they might find these requirements to be quite challenging, but I think it's a very good thing that we work with TM1, because TM1 make things so easier, and you'll see, like, by the end of this session that how easy it is to implement these requirements using TM1 rules. So I guess let's go through these 4 scenarios at a high level. So the first one I'm going to talk about is phasing across multiple years and months. So and the example that I took is depreciation, but it doesn't have to be that. Like, there are lots of use cases where you take like one number and then you have to spread it across multiple months, going across years, based on some sort of calculation. So that's like a very frequently experienced user sort of requirement. The second one is an interesting one. I must admit I haven't seen this a lot, but if you come across this, like, where you have to differentiate between a 0 input as opposed to a no input. So as you know that in TM1 cubes, by default everything is 0, but I guess we'll go through the rules, like, how we can differentiate a 0 from a null value, I guess. This third one is more of an allocation thing. Again, what is a smart way or an easy way of doing allocations, like where, like the example that I took in this case is like, cost being allocated to margin generating business units, depending on the contributions. The third use case and the fourth use case, apologies, is I guess I'm calling it the checking the accuracy of a forecast. So it's a bit hard to go through in wording. So we'll look at the example. So basically that will introduce doing some simple statistical calculation using rules. So without further delay, let's get started. Cool. So the first one we'll go through is phasing across years and months. So as you can see, I've taken an example of depreciation, and for a particular asset, I have got the initial value of that asset and the minimum written down value after the asset has gone past its life, the purchase date, and the depreciation months, or as in like the life of this asset. So based on these 4 key inputs, what I need to do is be able to apply this calculation from the starting month, in this case October, until the number of months, 36 months, and it needs to be dynamic. So basically, any one of these can change, and this needs to change. This needs to reflect in the cubes. So let's. I'm going to use ARC to do this demonstration. So ARC is a development tool for TM1 developers, and it also allows you to browse cubes and everything if you didn't know. And I've got the slides already up. Sorry, just quickly let me connect. So I will open up the view. Okay. So let's see. So remember this, I've got 4 inputs that I need to make, and which is in the lookup cube. And at the moment, this is the cube where it does all the calculations, right? So if at the moment it's got 36 months starting from October, but if I want to change it, let's say if I want to change it to starting from December, and if I come back here and do a calculation, we should see that it's starting from December going for 36 months and so on. So I guess, how do we do it in terms of implementing this requirement, right? The answer is quite simple. Like I said, one of the first things that I generally do when I've got a requirement like this is, if the user input is a date input, if possible, and if it is allowable, that we can assume that, the fraction of the month is not a problem. What we can do is convert that into a month. So it's a simple formula. I can either apply a rule to achieve this, or you can have all the dates in advance in a dimension, or in a small lookup cube and have the purchase month and the year being converted. The advantage of doing it is that when you write the actual rule that does the calculation, becomes a lot simpler and a more easier to read. So as you can see here, I've got my depreciation start period index. So if I go and have a look at the calculation, all it is saying is that it's looking up a cube, which is the sys period lookup, and it's saying that whatever the purchase year and the purchase month is, give me the index. And this will come handy, because when I look for a data in the cube, I will use this start index to know when to start the phasing from. So I guess just wanted to quickly also show you the cube that I was talking about. So here we should see we have got all the year and the month combinations and pretty much the sequence, and this is where it's picking up from. So that's the first thing that I did, which is in this lookup cube. And if I go and have a look at the rule itself, so I have pretty much calculating this in this rule. So this is not, I'm going to focus more. I guess the more I want to focus on the actual cube, the cube where I'm doing all these calculations, right? So remember, the cube I have got is this cube, which is the asset detail cube. And I need to be able to do the phasing from the start month until the end of the month based on the input that I have put into the lookup cube. So how do I do it? So I guess I need to assign on the left-hand side of this this rule is that where I want to apply this calculation, right? So I know that it's going to apply for the forecast version. I also know it's going to apply on the depreciation metric, and I know it's going to apply on the value, right? But what I don't know is which month or which period they are going to be applied on. So to do that, what we can do is use a bunch of if statements. So basically, and again, the other thing that I need to check is the depreciation method. So in this case, it's a straight line method, so which I've already checked. And after that, here, what I'm doing is that I'm checking. So depending on which cell I'm trying to access. So for example, if I'm trying to access this cell, which is the 2021 October, this rule will go and grab that period index from that index indexing queue, which is here. Actually, I already opened it. From here, right? So I guess, so once it gets that index, what it does, it says, okay, well, is it greater than or more than my depreciation starting period index, right? See how I've already calculated this beforehand. That's what made this rule look a bit more simplified. Otherwise, you will be doing all this, like, sort of, checking or finding out the index, or is it bigger or lower, that type of thing. And then in this section here, what I'm doing is that, again, another condition. So what I'm checking is that the cell is less than the starting index plus the depreciation months. So what you can also do is that, remember in this lookup, I could also have like another sort of, pre-calculated sort of, measure to say what is the end period index. That way, like, this rule will be even more simplified, if you want to say. And then the rest is pretty much dividing that by the number of months. So I guess, as I said at the beginning, like, and it might come across as a very complex requirement, but see, like, the number of lines in this rule is pretty simple. And that's kind of the beauty of, like, using the rule calculations in TM1. So that was my sort of, first use case. The second one, I am going to
interrupt really quick.
Sure.
There's a question. How do you handle depreciation that exceeds the depreciation final index period?
That's a good question. So I guess we need to
What? Can you repeat the question? I don't know if you could hear me.
So the question is when is the, like, when the depreciation.
How do you handle depreciation that exceeds the depreciation final index period? Yeah.
Cool. So I think there is a few ways you can do it. Like, one of the ways you can do it is you can have a remainder of, like, the what you have, the total written, what is the total value that needs to be depreciated across the number of months, and put it into the last month of the index, or so you can kind of force it to equal to the total number that needs to be depreciated on. So thanks for the question, by the way. And so the second scenario that I'm going to go through is, again, it may not be a very frequently, like, frequently encountered user case, but I guess what I'm going to show here is like a differentiate between the null and the zero value. So for example, in a university or in a school, there is a difference between attempting a test as opposed to, like, not attempting a test as opposed to attempting a test and getting a zero. So by default, TM1 cube will treat all these cells as zero values, right? So I guess here a student has got these test values, which is 10, 20, and 0. So therefore, my average needs to be 30 divided by 3, so not like, for everything. So I guess that's why my average is 10. So I guess to do this, I'll go back to my session here. So the first thing we need to do, obviously you need to have a skip check and the feeder sections and everything, but this is the statement that we need to put in to allow us to allow us for the cube views to be treated as, like, a null value. So I guess what I'll do is, if I display this cube, see how these cells have got, like, it doesn't say 0, like, and it's got null pretty much, whereas this one is 0, right? And if I go and sort of, clear the data, then my average becomes 15, which is like 2. So how do I do it? So that's the first thing is that statement here you need to put in so that we can differentiate the null values. The second thing is this little statement here where I'm saying that if the cell is not defined for that particular metric, and then assign it as a 0, otherwise assign it as a 1 when it comes to the count. And the calculation of the average is actually quite simple. It just goes and grabs the total score, divide by the number of count. So that was pretty much it, really. So like a very simple way of implementing this sort of requirement. So moving on to the next, which is again a simple sort of requirement. Sorry. So in this case, what I'm doing is I have a business. I mean, we can talk about our business, like, and we're doing consulting, we're selling software, we're doing training, and we have a support office, right? And what I want to be able to do is whatever cost that gets put into the support office or overhead cost, I will need to allocate that cost back into the revenue generating sort of business units, and in this case consulting, software, and training, and they may have their own sort of overhead as well. So I need to put the support overhead on top of what they have got in their overhead section, and by the end of the allocation, I guess this total EBIT number that cannot change, so that needs to remain the same. So again, the implementation part is not so complicated. So here I have got sort of the first screen. So this screen where this is really just showing the input. So I can go and put in the input, like, whatever my data entry needs to be. And in this case, I'm just going to go and input some data. And this is where the summary, actually, the summary needs to look like, right? So, so let's see how I have got in the support, after the allocation, there is no data in support overhead, even though I had put in 200 in here. And then in the revenue generating, I had a total of 30 overhead. So which means that all up, I guess my total business unit overhead is 200 plus 30, which means that it has got its own overhead plus what has come from the support sections. So I guess in doing the implementation of this rule, again, it's quite simple. And before I go through the rule sections, what I'll do is that I'll show you this screen. So in the actual cube, in the measure, what I did is I have got value where the data gets put into, and I've got an additional measure called allocation. So which means that I can use this allocation measure, which is kind of a nice little trick, to do all the allocation. That way, my total will be whatever has been allocated plus what was the original value. So this way, you don't lose any visibility or transparency. Like what the original value was still remains the same. It's untouched. It's you're using the allocation measure to do the allocation. So let's go through the actual rule section here. So the first thing is I need to get this 200 out of the support, right? So the way we can do it is, again, on the allocation measure, it's a very simple one-line rule. Obviously, I need to define which version it applies to and what business unit and what is the metric. And in the allocation section, I'm saying that whatever has been put into the value, just reverse it out. And in the next section, which is here, what I'm doing is that I'm doing a quick check. If the business unit type is equal to margin, which means if it is a revenue generating business unit, then go and grab the support, go and grab the overhead from the support business unit, multiply it with the with its own revenue, and then divide it by the total business unit revenue. So which kind of gives me, this gives me the proportion of the revenue compared to the total business unit, and this gives me the overhead section. So, so I guess that's that. Like, you know, as you can see that, you know, it's by writing this couple of rules, which is again quite simple. It gets me my desired objective, which is like, you know, doing the allocation. So I need to kind of hurry up a little bit. Now I've got 5 minutes left. Thank you, Ben. So my next case is, I'm calling it the checking the accuracy of a forecast. So I'll quickly explain what's happening here. So this, in this case, it is based on pathology test. So I have got test count for a particular test. It could be full blood count or could be anything. I'm capturing the test number of tests for each week, and then the middle line here is the average, which is kind of a rolling 13-week average, and the bottom line here is like a, I'm calling it a lower, which is average minus standard deviation, and the top line is the upper boundary or upper limit, which is average plus standard deviation. So idea is that 95% of the, I want to capture the 95%, 95 percentile sort of, you know, the data in this section. And these are my, like, you know, the actual sort of, you know, I guess because it's rules, I'm saying that these are my forecasts. So I guess if we're doing forecasts for future weeks, or it can be actual or historical reporting months, I want to look out for this, like, you know, outliers where I've got either way too less referrals or way too many type of thing. So I need to calculate the average. I need to calculate the standard deviation, and it needs to be rolling 13 weeks as well. So something like this, right? So let's have a quick look at the rules section. So that's my actual cube. And so the first thing I need to do is that, see, this average is actually rolling 13 weeks. So if I go and have a look here, see how it is, it's actually, it's looking for like a rolling 13. So the first trick is that because we know that what is the loading 13-week sort of in roll up is going to look like. So if we pre-build this roll ups, so if I go and have a look at the actual weeks, you'll see that I have got all these roll ups pre-built. So essentially, that's something that I can use to get the total the volume, and then I can pretty simply divide it by the count or the number of tests that has come through. To do the standard deviation, it's something like this. So I'll quickly skip through here. So it may look like a very long sort of, you know, rule, but it's actually dynamic. So it's not, there's no hard coding. I mean, these are giving you from the current week to the previous week. So basically based on the 13 weeks test count data that I have, and it's actually sort of, you know, this calculation, which is pretty much like, you know, getting from the current value and taking away the average and doing a square. And then once I have added them all up, I am dividing by the number of weeks and doing a square root function. I guess this deviation, it's actually not a function. It's actually like a roll up, like a simple roll up. So if I show you in here, see how deviation is nothing but value minus average. So that takes care of my subtraction, and then once I have it, pretty much going back to my rules section. This is my sort of current week. This is my previous week, and it just goes all the way up to 13 weeks. And it doesn't matter which week you're referring to. It will always start from the current week and going back to the previous weeks and so on. So I guess that's to the end of my sort of use case and presentation. I hope I'm on time and everything. Thank you very much.
Time, man.
No worries. Cool. So
yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks, Rashed, again. Yeah, you're done now, man. So you can relax. You got both your presentations done. Yes. So, but the conference rolls on, of course. So, in the next section, right after this, you can go check out Nick Renaud, who's going to do an interview with John Lee. So that'll be a more sort of relaxed and intimate conversation between them. There's also going to be an introduction to planning analytics for Excel by Jeffrey Lando from the Melbourne team. There'll be a presentation from Allegis Group, a recruitment company in India, called Recruitment Operational Business Intelligence, ROBI. So there's been some presentations from Allegis in the past years that was quite popular, so looking forward to that. And David Saurin is going to do an update on TM1 in the cloud and software as a service. So go check those out. And don't forget that there's networking coming up again. They'll be run by the India team relatively soon. So I hope everyone can check that out. And put in your feedback. So don't leave without putting in feedback for every session that you attend today, please. Thank you. And goodbye.
Thank you.